I knew the moment it began, not because someone attacked me, but because nothing did. For 3 consecutive nights, no disturbances appeared within my range. No restless spirits, no emotional residues clinging to corners of rooms. Even the subtle background noise of imbalance, the constant hum I had grown accustomed to, fell silent. It was unnatural. The world does not become quiet on its own. Hu Xiaoba appeared with her guard raised, eyes scanning space rather than scenery. "You're being avoided," she said. "By whom?" "By everything that does not wish to be noticed," she replied. "Which means something else is doing the noticing now." The realization settled slowly, heavily. Anchors were not supposed to stand out. Their function depended on anonymity, blending into the fabric of imbalance, not becoming a focal point. But I had contained a collapsing anchor without lineage, without authorization, and without erasing myself in the process. That made me anomalous, and anomalies attract attention. The first sign was territorial pressure. In a small border town, the air thickened abruptly, like stepping into water. Talismans embedded into the walls pulsed faintly, reacting to my presence. I felt resistance, not from spirits, but from structures. Someone had marked this area, a local enforcement sect. They appeared before dusk, 3 practitioners in identical gray robes, movements synchronized, expressions neutral. Their eyes did not register fear or hostility, only assessment. "You do not belong to any registry," the one in the center said. "State your affiliation." I did not answer. Hu Xiaoba whispered urgently, "Do not claim the Hu clan. They are testing jurisdiction." "I walk alone," I replied. The lie tasted bitter. The practitioners exchanged glances. "Then you are unclaimed," the leader said calmly, "which makes you a resource or a liability." They advanced, not aggressively, clinically. I felt the weight of overlapping formations closing in, nets designed not to harm, but to restrain and measure, to catalog. I broke through without ritual, just presence. The air snapped outward, pressure rebounding violently. The practitioners staggered back, eyes widening for the first time. That reaction, one muttered, was not external manipulation. "No," the leader said slowly. "That was anchoring." I left before they recovered, but I knew I had been identified. After that night, movement became dangerous. Staying in one place longer than a day drew attention. Not immediately, but predictably. Subtle surveillance, disguised practitioners, neutral spirits behaving unnaturally cautious. I was no longer beneath notice. I was being tracked. Hu Xiaoba confirmed what I had begun to suspect. "You are not the only one who noticed the vacancy left by Lin Q," she said. "When an anchor collapses, the space it occupied destabilizes surrounding territories. Others feel that absence, and they want to fill it," I said. "Yes," she replied, "but not with something uncontrolled." That was when the second faction revealed itself. They did not approach openly. They waited until night, until the boundary thinned enough to speak without witnesses. A voice emerged from the dark, layered, resonant, carrying the authority of long accumulation. "You are inefficient," it said, "but resilient." I did not turn. "You stabilized a breach without erasure," the voice continued. "That suggests adaptability. We offer structure." I recognized the signature, not fox, not weasel, a collective. One of the old coalitions that managed large-scale karmic infrastructure, disaster zones, mass graves, battlefields. They did not cultivate individuals. They deployed them. "I'm not interested," I said. The voice did not react. You misunderstand, it replied. This is not recruitment, it is classification. The pressure increased, not forceful, comprehensive. They were mapping me, layers, thresholds, tolerances, testing how much debt I carried, how much remained unexpressed. Hu Xiaoba materialized fully, tails faintly visible, stance defensive. You have no claim, she said sharply. He is under Hu jurisdiction. The voice paused. Partially, it conceded, but not exclusively. His structure exceeds standard Hu parameters. That was the most dangerous sentence I had heard in years. Because it was true. The coalition withdrew, not retreating, but postponing. We will observe, the voice said. An anchor that moves independently is unstable. You will prove us right or remove yourself. Silence followed. I exhaled slowly. That night, Hu Xiaoba did something she had never done before. She bowed. From this point forward, she said, you will be contested. By dawn, rumors had already spread of a presence that suppressed disturbances without ritual, of a moving dead zone where minor spirits refused to manifest, of a man whose passage left gaps in karmic flow. Some sought to control me, others to eliminate me. None intended to leave me alone. As I walked through the outskirts of the city, I felt eyes on me, human, non-human, organizational. The world had recalibrated around my existence. I was no longer an unseen anchor, I was a variable, and variables are either stabilized or removed. I tightened my grip on the debt within me and kept walking, because I finally understood the rule no one teaches. Once the system notices you, survival is no longer about hiding. It's about deciding who gets to define what you are. They did not ask immediately. That was how I knew the pressure was real. For days, representatives appeared without formally appearing. Subtle overlaps in space, pauses in ambient flow, the unmistakable sense of being evaluated. Each faction waited, confident that inevitability would do the persuading for them. It worked on others. It did not work on me. The first to speak openly was the local enforcement sect. They approached in daylight this time, robes clean, posture respectful. No formations activated, no weapons drawn. You are disrupting regional stability, their envoy said, unintentionally perhaps, but disruption nonetheless. I did not deny it. We offer affiliation, he continued, registration, oversight, in exchange, protection, and operational scope. And limits, I said. He nodded, naturally. The second offer came that same night. The coalition did not manifest directly. Instead, a zone of influence settled around me. Space subtly compressed, time fractionally delayed. Their voice carried no impatience. You are inefficient alone, it said again. Under us, you would be optimized, your debt redistributed, your failure rate minimized. You would own me, I replied. We would allocate you, it corrected. The Hu clan was last. Hu Xiaoba appeared before dawn, expression grave, tails faint but present. San Taiye has spoken, she said. You are to be recalled. The word landed heavier than any threat. Recalled meant shelter. It meant definition. It meant becoming something named, with rank, with role, with expectation. You would be safe, Hu Xiaoba said softly. As safe as someone like you can be. I looked at her. And my sister? She hesitated. Human jurisdictions would no longer be yours to cross freely. There it was. Every offer carried the same core demand. Choose a side, accept a label, be contained. I understood then that neutrality had already expired. What remained was compliance or refusal, and refusal had consequences. I did not respond to any of them immediately. Instead, I walked, not to flee but to listen. I followed fault lines where imbalance naturally accumulated, places no one claimed because they were too inconvenient, too unstable, too small to justify infrastructure. Abandoned transit, hubs, half-forgotten residential blocks, temporary shelters between redevelopment phases. I stood, and I let the debt speak, not as power, as constraint. I felt where intervention helped and where it merely delayed collapse, where spirits needed guidance and where removal was mercy, where humans needed answers and where silence was kinder. Patterns emerged, rules not imposed but discovered. When the first faction confronted me again, I was ready. They found me at the edge of a condemned district, the air already settling into equilibrium. "You've made your choice?" the envoy asked. "Yes," I said. "And your affiliation?" "I don't accept one." His expression hardened. "That is not an option." "It is," I replied. "I'm exercising it." The pressure came immediately. Formal containment protocols activating, jurisdictional claims asserted. I felt the net form around me, and then it failed. Not violently, simply, ineffectively. The area rejected. External authority, not because I resisted, but because I had already assumed responsibility. "This zone," I said calmly, "is under temporary stabilization, no extraction, no cataloging, no escalation." "You have no right." "I do," I interrupted. "Because I am the one who stays when you leave." The envoy stepped back, unsettled. Word traveled fast after that. Of an anchor who did not belong, of territories that refused external classification, of disturbances resolving without ownership transfer. The coalition tested next, heavier pressure, broader assessment. Their presence pressed against me like a system trying to recognize incompatible code. "You are defining scope without authority," the voice said. "I'm defining limits," I replied, mine included. The Hu clan came last. Hu Xiaobao stood before me, conflicted. "You're isolating yourself," she said, "without backing, without lineage." "Without leash," I finished. Silence stretched between us. Finally she bowed, not in command, but in acknowledgement. "Then you will be recorded," she said quietly. "Not as an asset, not as a subordinate." "As what?" I asked. She met my eyes. "As a variable the system cannot absorb." That night I formalized it, not in writing, in practice. I intervened only where collapse would propagate. I refused cases that sought comfort over resolution. I left when balance was restored, before dependence formed. No banners, no disciples, no permanent territory, just movement. The factions adjusted, not acceptance, but recalibration. They stopped trying to claim me and started planning around me, which was victory enough. As dawn broke, I felt the debt settle, not lighter but aligned. The pressure became directional instead of crushing. For the first time since crossing the boundary, I was not reacting, I was acting. I thought of my sister, living quietly, untouched by this storm, and I understood the final shape of my path. I would not be remembered as human, nor enshrined as something else. I would be the reason some places never tipped over the edge, a moving margin, a refusal made consistent. And if the world insisted on naming me, it would have to do so on my terms. The first violation was small, intentional but measured. A minor sect moved into one of the zones I had stabilized, installing boundary markers and ritual pylons under the pretext of temporary oversight. They did not ask. They assumed my silence would equal consent. I dismantled the pylons at dawn. No ritual, no warning, just removal. By nightfall, a notice circulated through channels I did not belong to and never read, yet still felt ripple through the fabric around me. Unregulated anchor interference, operational instability risk, containment authorized. Hu Xiaoba appeared with urgency I had not seen since the early days. "They're escalating," she said. "Joint operation, multiple jurisdictions, even. The coalition has signed off." I nodded. It had been inevitable. Rules that work quietly are tolerated. Rules that hold under pressure become threats. The pursuit began without spectacle. Transport routes subtly closed. Areas I passed through developed coincidental patrol density. Practitioners trained to sense anomalies followed at a distance, never engaging, just narrowing options. They were herding, I let them, because herding assumes the target moves like prey. The ambush came at a dry riverbed, its banks lined with dead reeds and half-buried debris. Formations rose simultaneously, hexagonal grids locking space, suppressing displacement. Sigils anchored into the earth flared in sequence. At least 5 factions, coordinated, professional. "You are to be detained for evaluation," a voice announced, amplified by structure rather than volume. Non-compliance will be interpreted as hostile. I stepped forward and stopped, not because I was restrained, but because the deep riverbed answered. The ground exhaled. Residual grief from decades of drought, displacement, abandoned livelihoods. All of it stirred, aligning, not manifesting as spirits, but as weight. Pressure redistributed along the banks, destabilizing the grids. The formations flickered. "This zone is unstable," someone hissed. "Pull back." "No," the commander snapped. "Increase load." That was their mistake. They treated imbalance like resistance. I treated it like terrain. I did not attack. I withdrew support. The grids collapsed inward, folding harmlessly but decisively. Practitioners staggered, formations unraveling as the land refused their assumptions. I walked through the opening they created themselves. Behind me, confusion spread faster than orders. I was no longer just avoiding capture. I was demonstrating incompatibility. The response was swift. By morning, the narrative had shifted. I was no longer unregulated. I was destabilizing by precedent. If one anchor could operate independently and succeed, others might attempt the same. Systems did not fear rebellion. They feared replication. The coalition made the next move. They did not try to seize me. They challenged my rules. A high-density incident erupted 3 districts away. An orchestrated convergence of unresolved deaths, engineered emotional stressors, and ritual provocation. Not to cause catastrophe, to force intervention. "If you claim responsibility," Hu Xiaoba warned, "they'll argue jurisdiction breach." "If I don't," I said, "people die." That's the trap. I went anyway. The site was a temporary housing complex, crowded, tense, primed. The disturbance fed on proximity and panic, escalating rapidly. Coalition observers ringed the perimeter, invisible but unmistakable. I entered without concealment. No banners, no claims, just presence. The escalation slowed, not stopped, but redirected. I worked fast, making choices no committee would approve, severed attachments without ceremony, redirected manifestations away from the living, into spaces already marked by loss, left questions unanswered. When it stabilized, the observers closed in. "You intervened without authorization," the layered voice said. "You violated escalation protocol." "Yes," I replied, "because protocol would have waited." And if every anchor did the same, they can't, I said. They don't carry what I do. Silence, then pressure, not force, but assertion. An attempt to overwrite my standing, to classify me retroactively as rogue infrastructure. I felt the debt respond, not swelling but aligning. The second spine held. I don't claim permanence, I said. I don't expand. I don't recruit. I don't extract. You still interfere. I end interference, I corrected. You manage it. The coalition paused. Not agreement, calculation. They withdrew without concession. That was the verdict. Not guilty. Not cleared, unresolved. By night, the hunt slowed but did not stop. Factions adjusted tactics, no longer rushing, watching, learning where my rules bent and where they did not. Hu Xiaoba stood beside me at the edge of the city, gaze distant. You've survived the first trial, she said, but now they'll look for ways your rules fail. I know, I replied. She studied me carefully. If they find one, they'll use it, I finished. As we walked, I felt the weight of eyes recede slightly. Not gone, just recalibrated. The system had tested my gravity. It held, for now. I did not mistake survival for victory, but I had crossed another threshold. I was no longer reacting to pursuit. I was shaping the terms of engagement. And somewhere ahead, I knew, waited the moment when my rules would be challenged not by force, but by a choice that would cost more than I was prepared to pay. Some stories are not meant for the many. If you've listened this far and still haven't walked away, perhaps you too are someone who belongs nowhere. Subscribe and follow the channel so the next legends know where to find you.